Dawn's light struggled to seep through the gaps of the faded curtains, casting a soft glow over the modest room that Victor and his mother shared. It was a small space, with walls that had seen better days, covered with wallpaper peeling at the corners. The floor creaked under the weight of worn memories and hopes. Victor, even at 14, rose with the weight of the world on his shoulders. He approached his mother Hannah's bed, where she lay under thin, worn covers. Her face, pale and sculpted by chronic pain, contrasted with the darkness still lingering in the room. He gently held her hand, feeling the fragility of her bones under the thin skin. "Mom," Victor whispered, his voice a mix of concern and tenderness, "I promise things will get better for us. Please don't give up." Hannah slowly opened her eyes, meeting her son's determined gaze. "Victor," she replied in a weak but loving voice, "you are the light of my days. Thank you for being so strong." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Elizabeth, Hannah's mother and Victor's grandmother. The door creaked open, and she entered carrying a small basket with bread and some fresh vegetables. Elizabeth was a woman with strong features and gray hair tied back in a loose bun. Life had not been kind to her, but her indomitable spirit still shone in her blue eyes. "I brought some fresh food," said Elizabeth, placing the basket on the worn wooden table near the window. "How is she today?" Victor looked at his mother, wishing he could give a more positive response. "The same," he replied, trying to hide the concern in his voice. "But we keep fighting, don't we, Grandma?" Elizabeth nodded, her face marked by resigned sadness. "Yes, my dear. We fight and we do not give up." She approached the bed and lovingly stroked her daughter's hair. "You're doing everything you can, Victor. And I will do what I can to help with the medications." The medications. That was the center of all their worries. The costs were exorbitant, consuming almost all the resources that Elizabeth could gather from her pension and the little that Victor brought home from his odd jobs. Each day, the hope of maintaining the necessary treatment seemed more distant, but Victor's determination strengthened. "I'm going out to try to make some more money today," said Victor, standing up and putting on an old jacket that was already short on his arms. "Someone has to take care of us, and I will do it." Elizabeth looked at her grandson with a mix of pride and worry. "Just be careful, Victor. The world out there can be tough." "I know, Grandma," he replied, offering a shy smile. "But not as tough as life in here." With one last look at his mother, who now watched the scene with tear-blurred eyes, Victor left the room, ready to face another day of struggle. The door closed behind him with a soft click, sealing the promise of a return not just with hopes, but with results. The morning stretched out slowly and quietly as Victor walked through the still somewhat dark streets of his city. The fresh early day breeze brought with it a mix of possibilities and the harsh reality he faced. With an old canvas bag slung over his shoulder, filled with gardening tools, he headed to the first house on his daily list. Upon arriving at the address, a residence with a large neglected garden, Victor placed his tools on the ground and knocked on the door. A middle-aged woman, with blonde hair tied back in a messy ponytail, answered. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm here to mow the lawn, as agreed," Victor said with a polite smile. "Oh, yes, of course. Please start at the back. The garden is a disaster, and I really need it to look presentable," the woman replied, pointing to the side of the house. "No problem, I'll take care of it for you," Victor assured, picking up his tools. As he mowed the lawn, his thoughts wandered to his mother and grandmother at home. The constant need for money for his mother's medications was an incessant pressure, but he was determined to do everything within his power to help. After finishing the job, he received his payment and said goodbye with a wave. The money was modest, but every cent counted. Victor then headed to the next task of the day, the neighborhood fair where he sold used items he had collected or that were donated by neighbors. The fair was set up in a large parking lot near the city center, and Victor carefully set up his small booth. He arranged the items, old books, some electronics, used clothes, in a way that would catch the passersby's attention. "Need help setting that up, kid?" a raspy voice asked. It was Mr. Martins, an old man who sold antiques at the booth next door. "I'm almost done, Mr. Martins, but thank you," Victor responded as he adjusted a stack of books. "You always work so hard, Victor." "Admirable," the old man commented, watching the young man with a mix of sympathy and respect. Victor just smiled. "I need to help at home," he said simply, turning his attention to a potential customer examining an old radio. Throughout the day, Victor interacted with various people, selling what he could. Each sale, no matter how small, was a victory, a step further towards the stability he so desired for his family. As the sun began to set, he started to pack up the unsold items. Fatigue weighed on his shoulders, but the sense of duty fulfilled brought a certain comfort. "Victor, before you go, take this. It might be useful for you to sell tomorrow," Mr. Martin said, handing him a box filled with various small and interesting objects. "Thank you so much, Mr. Martins." "This helps a lot," Victor thanked him, with a sincere smile. Carefully storing the box, Victor said goodbye and took the road home. The money in his pocket wasn't much, but it was the result of a day of honest and hard work. As he walked, he did not know that the following day would bring an encounter that would drastically change his perspective. The sun was already high when Victor returned to the fair the next morning, carrying the box of items that Mr. Martins had given him. He arranged his booth with a few more interesting objects, hoping to attract good buyers. The fair, a melting pot of sounds and colors, was especially busy, and Victor felt a mix of anxiety and hope. As he organized a stack of old books, a familiar voice cut through the hum of the crowd. "Victor. Wow, I can't believe it's you here." The voice carried a tone of feigned surprise that made Victor shudder before he even turned around. It was Suzanne, accompanied by a few friends. Her hair was perfectly done up, and she wore a dress that clearly screamed fashion and wealth. Victor straightened up, trying to appear indifferent to her evaluating gaze. "Suzanne," Victor greeted, forcing a smile. "What a surprise to see you here." Suzanne laughed, a sound more cruel than joyful. "I could say the same. I never imagined seeing you selling. What is this?" "Old junk." She picked up an object from the table, examining it with disdain before carelessly putting it back down. "I'm just trying to make some extra money," Victor responded, maintaining his composure. "Everyone does what they can, right?" "Oh, of course," Suzanne mocked, glancing at her friends who giggled softly. "It's just that, you know, John just got a new sports car from his dad. A birthday present. Imagine, a new car while others sell, well, this." Victor felt his face heat up but swallowed his pride. "Yeah, must be nice. But I'm happy helping my family. That's important to me." Suzanne tilted her head, her smile somewhat forced. "Oh, sure, family is important. But, you see, poor people always say that, don't they? Because, deep down, they don't have other achievements to talk about." Suzanne's words hit Victor like a punch in the stomach. He looked around, noticing a few curious glances from passers-by. The humiliation was almost palpable, but he took a deep breath, refusing to let her see him shaken. "You know, Suzanne," Victor began, his voice steady despite the internal turmoil, "there's more to life than just money and expensive gifts. There's dignity and respect. Things that, unfortunately, aren't for sale." Suzanne raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting this comeback. She opened her mouth to respond, but then one of her friends tugged at her arm. "Let it go, Suzanne. It's not worth it." With one last look of disdain at Victor, Suzanne walked away, the laughter of her friends echoing behind her. Victor watched as she moved away, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt humiliated, yes, but also steadfast in his purpose. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Suzanne's words hammered in his mind, but he tried to focus on his sales. However, as the day turned into evening, a feeling of unrest grew within him. Night had already descended upon the city, spreading its cloak of shadows and soft lights over the central square. Victor sat on a cold stone bench, the night breeze blowing gently, bringing with it the freshness that only darkness can offer. The stars twinkled above, indifferent to human tribulations, and the full moon cast a silvery glow on the cobblestone ground. With his elbows on his knees and his face buried in his hands, Victor plunged into a sea of thoughts. The humiliation he had suffered earlier at the fair with Suzanne still burned in his mind, mixing with the constant weight of responsibility he carried. "Why does life have to be so difficult, Lord?" he murmured to himself, his voice laden with exhaustion and dismay. It was then that a raspy voice, laden with time and wisdom, interrupted his somber thoughts. "Strong men are born in difficult times, boy," said the elderly man sitting next to him on the bench. Victor lifted his head, meeting the piercing eyes of a man with white hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His face was marked with numerous wrinkles, each one seemingly telling a story of its own. "Who are you?" asked Victor, his curiosity piqued by the gentle yet firm tone of the stranger. "My name is David Scott," the man replied, extending a wrinkled hand, which Victor shook, feeling the firmness of the grip. "And you, young man, seem to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. Do you want to talk about it?" Victor hesitated for a moment, but something about David's reassuring presence made him open up. "It's my mother. She's ill, and the medications are so expensive. I try to do everything I can, working every day, but sometimes it seems like it's never enough." David nodded, listening intently as Victor poured out his story. The young man talked about the death of his father, his mother's illness, and the occasional help he received from his grandmother Elizabeth. He also spoke about his day-to-day life, the small jobs he did, and how he felt when humiliated by people like Suzanne. "It's a heavy burden for a young man," David commented, his voice revealing a mix of compassion and respect. "But I see a strength in you, Victor. A strength that you might not have fully realized yet." Victor looked at the elderly man, questioning the nature of this strength. "How can you see that? I feel so lost sometimes." "Because I've been where you are, my young friend," David revealed, a distant look crossing his eyes. "Life has taught me that the greatest trials are also the greatest opportunities for growth. You're fighting not just for your mother, but for a future that can still be bright." David's words touched Victor in a way he hadn't expected. It was as if a small flame had been ignited within him, a flame of hope and determination. "Thank you, Mr. Scott," Victor said sincerely. I needed to hear that." David smiled. "Sometimes, all we need is someone to remind us of our own strength. And Victor, if you want, I can show you something that might help lighten this burden." "Curious," Victor agreed, and David stood up, picking up a guitar that had been sitting unnoticed by Victor's side on the bench. "Music has a special power, my friend. Let's see what it can do for you." David, with a serene gesture, handed the guitar to Victor, whose eyes reflected a mix of surprise and hesitation. "Come on, Victor, don't be shy," encouraged David, sitting back down on the stone bench, the guitar now resting in his lap. "Music is a friend that never criticizes, only understands." Victor, still uncertain, sat down next to David. He looked at the instrument with a kind of reverence, his hands trembling slightly as he touched the cold strings. I don't know," Victor began, his voice low. "I played a bit in school, but people laughed. I wasn't good." David smiled with gentle wisdom. "Victor, music isn't about being good in the eyes of others. It's about what it brings to you, to your soul. It's a way to speak without words, to fight without fists." Inspired by David's words, Victor adjusted the guitar in his lap, his fingers timidly positioning themselves on the strings. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and allowed his fingers to start dancing gently over the strings. At first, the notes were uncertain, hesitant, but as Victor loosened up, the music began to flow more freely. Soft, sad but beautiful melodies began to spread across the square, blending with the night hum of the city. David listened, admiringly. The boy had a natural talent, an ability to express deep emotions with simple arrangements of notes. "This is wonderful, Victor," he said, as the music finally dwindled, fading into the silence of the night. "You have a true gift." Victor opened his eyes, a feeling of accomplishment flooding him. I didn't know I could do this," he admitted, a shy smile emerging. "Sometimes, we just need someone to show us the way," said David, taking the guitar back and placing it carefully beside him. "And speaking of ways, Victor, I have a proposal for you." Victor looked at David with renewed interest, the music still echoing in his chest, a sense of limitless possibilities opening up before him. "I run a small music school," David continued, his eyes glowing with contagious enthusiasm. "It's nothing grand, but it's a place where people like you, who love music, can learn and grow without fear of judgment. And I'd like you to join us, Victor. For free. Think of it as an investment in your future, in your well-being." Victor was speechless. The offer was more than generous. It was a spark of hope in his darkness. I would love that, Mr. David. But I don't know if I can." "You can, Victor. You must," David interrupted gently. "Don't let the shadows of the past darken the bright paths ahead of you. Music can be your light, your guide." With his heart beating with a mix of nervousness and excitement, Victor agreed. "Yes, I accept." David nodded in approval, a broad smile spreading across his face. "Great. We start tomorrow. Get ready, Victor. Your life is about to change." And as they stood up from the bench, leaving the guitar and the shadows of the night behind, Victor felt that for the first time in a long time, he was moving towards something wonderful. Little did he know that tomorrow would not only test his new commitment to music, but also bring new challenges that would further shape his destiny. The square was still enveloped in the quiet of the night when David, with a calm smile, revealed more about his life to Victor. They walked slowly, the cool night air caressing their faces, the deserted streets echoing their steps. "Victor, a few years ago, I opened a small music school in the old district of the city," David began, his voice filled with contagious enthusiasm. "It's not just a place to learn notes and chords, but a space where hearts and minds meet to explore the beauty of music." Victor, though moved by the offer, felt a whirlwind of emotions. Uncertainty about his own abilities still haunted him. "I really appreciate this, Mr. David, but I don't know if I'm good enough. Music, for me, has always been more of a personal refuge than something I could share or teach others." David stopped and placed a hand on Victor's shoulder, making him stop as well. "Victor, let me tell you something I've learned from life and music. The beauty of music doesn't just reside in technical perfection. It lives in the stories it allows us to tell, in the emotions it helps us express. You have a unique story, and your music reflects that." Victor looked at the ground, pondering David's words. The moon illuminated his face, revealing the internal struggle between his desire to advance and the fear of failure. "Moreover," David continued, smiling, "the classes are free. I thought of this as an investment in human potential, not just a business. You won't have to pay anything, but what you will learn can enrich your life more than any money could." Victor felt a warmth growing inside him, a mix of gratitude and hope. "Do you really think I can do this? That I can truly learn and maybe, one day, teach?" "I don't think, Victor, I know," David affirmed with conviction. "You've already shown you have the heart and sensitivity for this. What you need now is just a bit of guidance and practice." Inspired by the encouraging words and the unconditional support of David, Victor finally nodded, a decision forming in his heart. "All right, Mr. David. I accept your offer. I'll try, with everything I have." "Excellent!" exclaimed David, a sparkle of joy in his eyes. "We start tomorrow. Prepare for a new chapter in your life, my young friend." As they continued to walk under the starry sky, Victor felt as though he was stepping into a great adventure. It wasn't just about learning music. It was about discovering a new part of himself, about facing his fears, and perhaps about transforming his own life. The conversation with David not only reignited a flame of hope in Victor, but also planted the seed of new confidence in his heart. He was ready to face the challenge, not knowing that the future held not just lessons in music, but also encounters and experiences that would test his resolve and further expand his world. Dawn's light spilled over the city when Victor arrived at David's music school for the first time. The building was old, with exposed bricks and large windows that let in natural light, creating a warm and inspiring atmosphere. David greeted him with a warm smile. "Are you ready to start your journey, Victor?" asked David, leading him through a hallway filled with photos of musicians and posters of musical events. "I'm a bit nervous, but yes, I'm ready," Victor replied, looking around with curious and somewhat admiring eyes. "Great. Let's start with the basics and progress as you feel comfortable," David explained, guiding him to a small, but well-equipped classroom with various musical instruments. The first few weeks were intense. Victor learned not just about musical techniques, but also about how music can evoke and express deep emotions. David was a patient teacher, always encouraging Victor to explore beyond the notes and find his own musical voice. As Victor delved deeper into the study of music, his confidence grew. He began to compose small pieces, each reflecting more of his personal and emotional journey. David listened attentively, occasionally adjusting a posture or suggesting a harmony, but always encouraging Victor to maintain his authenticity. "You have a natural gift for connecting your emotions to your music, Victor. That is something that cannot be taught, it can only be enhanced," David praised after a particularly emotive session. Inspired by these words, Victor began performing at local events. Small cafes, community events, and even neighborhood parties became stages for his performances. The first few times were daunting, but each applause and each smile from the audience nourished his soul and reinforced his desire to continue. Over time, he began to earn not just applause, but also a modest income from his performances. Every dollar earned was carefully saved, intended to help with his mother's medical expenses. While Victor was immersed in his new musical life, mysterious aid began arriving for his mother. Necessary medications, previously difficult to acquire due to cost, started appearing regularly at their door. Initially puzzled, Victor questioned his grandmother Elizabeth and even neighbors, but no one could explain the origin of these deliveries. "It must be a guardian angel, Victor," joked Elizabeth, seeing the relief the anonymous help brought. Victor smiled, grateful yet curious about who might be behind the generosity. Deep down, he felt a profound gratitude that reinforced his desire to give back to the world through his music. Victor received news that would bring a new color to his life, a vibrant and exciting one. David called him to the music room, where the aroma of old wood and varnish always brought a feeling of seriousness and magic. "Victor, I have something incredible to tell you," David began, barely able to contain the enthusiasm in his voice. He gestured for Victor to sit next to him, which Victor did, his heart beating with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. "What happened, Mr. David?" Victor asked, noticing the sparkle in his mentor's eyes. David smiled, his expression one of sharing a wonderful secret. "You've been invited to perform at the City Music Festival. It's one of the most prestigious events in the region, and this year, they want you to be one of the main artists." Victor's heart leaped. "Me? A main artist? But, Mr. David, I've only recently started performing in public. Isn't this too much for me?" "Victor," said David, placing a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder. "You're ready for this. Your music has touched people in a way that few can. This is your moment, the stage where you'll show the world the power of your art." As he absorbed the news, Victor felt a wave of emotions: fear, excitement, disbelief. "All right," he finally said, his voice steady despite the internal tremors. "I'll do it. I'll give it my best." "That's what I wanted to hear," exclaimed David, smiling broadly. "And we'll prepare you for it. We'll intensify your rehearsals, work on your repertoire, and make sure you're ready to shine." In the days that followed, Victor plunged into a rigorous routine of practice and preparation. Each morning, he woke up at sunrise, practiced until the strings felt like extensions of his own fingers, and each note resonated not just in the room but in his soul. David was by his side every step of the way, guiding him, challenging him to go beyond his perceived limitations. "What if I forget the notes? What if my hand trembles?" Victor questioned during one of his many rehearsals. "Then you play from the heart. Music is more than memorization, Victor. It's about feeling. Even if you miss a note, you won't lose the melody," advised David, always patient. As the festival day approached, Victor's nervousness slowly transformed into eager anticipation. He began to feel a deeper connection with the music he created, a sense that each song was a piece of his story, his struggle, his hope. One afternoon, while rehearsing the piece he had chosen to open his performance, Victor closed his eyes and let his music fill the room, each note pulsating with his energy and emotions. David, standing by the door, watched, knowing that Victor was ready to turn his nervousness into a performance that would touch hearts. As the last note echoed through the room, David applauded, a singular sound that spread through the space like a prelude to the larger applause that would come. Victor opened his eyes, a shy but confident smile on his lips. "You are ready, Victor. The world is waiting for your music," said David, the confidence in his voice reflecting the trust he had in his student. With the arrival of the big day, Victor found himself facing a new dawn, not just a literal one, but a dawn of possibilities, a future he had never imagined possible. And as he prepared to step onto the stage that would change his life, he knew that every step taken so far had led him to this moment. The city was vibrant, pulsing with the energy of the music festival that drew crowds from all around. Victor, his heart pounding in his chest, walked backstage, feeling the weight of each step bringing him closer to the stage. Backstage, the tension was palpable. Sound technicians adjusted the final details, musicians tuned their instruments, and the aroma of strong coffee mixed with the scent of anticipation in the air. As Victor approached the stage, he was greeted by David, who wore a reassuring smile. "It's time, Victor. You're ready for this," David said, placing a hand on the young musician's shoulder. "Remember, no matter what happens, play from the heart." Victor took a deep breath, nodding with determination. "Thank you, Mr. David, for everything." The curtains slowly opened, and the intense stage lights hit Victor, almost blinding him momentarily. As his eyes adjusted, the first chords of his performance began to flow from his fingers, steady and precise. The piece he chose to start with was his own composition, a piece that narrated his journey, his struggles, and his hopes. As the melody unfolded, the audience was visibly moved. Some closed their eyes, immersing themselves in the experience, while others watched Victor with admiration. With each note he played, Victor felt more connected to the audience, his confidence growing with each applause that echoed through the venue. He allowed himself to dive deeper into the music, each movement on stage a reflection of the passion he felt for what he was doing. "He's incredible, isn't he?" Someone in the crowd was heard saying. "Yes, he plays with his soul," responded another, their voice choked with emotion. As the performance progressed, Victor realized he was not just playing music. He was sharing a part of himself, something true and pure. The final chord of his performance rang out, strong and clear, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then, like a wave, the applause erupted, overwhelming and deafening. Victor looked out at the audience, his eyes shining with tears of gratitude and relief. He had done it, overcome his fears, and the audience had understood, had felt every emotion he wanted to convey. David, watching from the wings, felt a mix of pride and satisfaction. "Did you see that? He really touched the people," he commented to a colleague beside him. "Yes, he's a true artist. He has a great future ahead of him," the colleague replied, also visibly impressed. As Victor left the stage, the applause still echoing in his ears, he knew that night was only the beginning of something greater. He didn't yet know what the future held, but he was ready to face it with music as his faithful companion. Still riding the euphoria of his performance, Victor walked through the backstage area, the sound of applause still resonating in his ears like a sweet echo of his achievement. As he reached for a bottle of water, trying to calm the adrenaline coursing through his veins, a familiar figure crossed his path, bringing with it memories of a not-so-distant past. Suzanne, who had watched Victor's performance from the audience, seemed completely out of place amid the crowd still celebrating the music. Her eyes, once full of disdain and superiority, now showed a glimmer of surprise and perhaps a touch of regret. She approached Victor, moving through the crowd with a determination that seemed misplaced. "Victor, I just wanted to say that your performance was incredible," she began, her voice wavering, betraying her not-so-sincere intentions. Victor, holding the water bottle, turned slowly to face her. The surprise on his face quickly gave way to a calm indifference. "Thank you, Suzanne," he replied simply, his eyes briefly scanning her expression before looking past her to a distant point. I really didn't expect that you could. That you would be capable of something like this. You've changed so much," Suzanne continued, trying to find a way to reconnect with Victor. Victor nodded, a lightness in his posture contrasting with the evident tension in Suzanne. "People change, Suzanne. Circumstances change. Music changed me," he said, his voice firm and without a trace of the insecurity he once had. Suzanne bit her lip, clearly unsettled by Victor's confidence. "Victor, about that time at the fair, I was really hard on you." "I'm sorry," she admitted, her gaze lowered. "It's all right," Victor responded, beginning to walk away. "We all make mistakes, Suzanne. What's important is what we do afterward." Suzanne paused, as if wanting to say more, but the words seemed to fail her. She just nodded as Victor walked away, surrounded by friends and admirers coming to congratulate him. Leaving Suzanne behind, Victor felt a symbolic closure of a chapter in his life. He felt no anger or resentment, just a quiet acceptance that some people enter our lives as lessons. As he walked, the glare of the spotlights and the murmur of conversations around him began to fade, and Victor felt a clarity emerging within him. He knew that from that moment on, new challenges and opportunities awaited, and he was ready to face them with the same determination and passion that had brought him to the stage that night. The post-show atmosphere was still buzzing with energy as Victor and David moved away from the crowd, looking for a quieter place to talk. They found a small cafe, still open to take advantage of the festival's bustle, and settled into a secluded corner. David ordered 2 coffees and, while they waited, observed Victor, who seemed lost in thought, reflecting on the night and everything that had happened. "Victor," David began, breaking the silence with an unusual seriousness in his voice. "There's something I need to tell you, something important." Victor looked at David, his expression becoming curious. "What is it, Mr. David?" David sighed, his eyes reflecting a mix of hesitation and resolution. "You know that your mother has been receiving her medications regularly, despite the financial difficulties," he began, carefully watching Victor's reaction. Yes, Victor knew. "Yes, it's been a blessing. We didn't know who was helping us, but," he hesitated, his voice filled with gratitude, "it was an incredible relief." David nodded, giving a small smile. "I am the one who has been sending the medications to your mother, Victor. I wanted to help somehow, and that seemed the most appropriate way." Victor was stunned for a moment, processing the revelation. "You? But why didn't you tell me?" David took a sip of his coffee before responding. "I didn't want the help to come with a name. It wasn't about recognition. It was about doing the right thing, about ensuring that you could focus on your music without that constant worry." Victor felt a wave of emotions: surprise, gratitude, admiration. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. David. This meant so much to us." David waved his hand, deflecting the thanks. "You don't need to thank me, Victor. What I want is for you to understand something very important about life and helping others." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "True humility is doing good without expecting anything in return. It's easy to get lost in the pursuit of applause and recognition, but true satisfaction comes from knowing you've made a difference, even if no one else knows. Victor reflected on those words, feeling their weight and truth. I understand, Mr. David, and I hope to live by that example. You've shown me more than music. You've shown me how to be a better person. David smiled, satisfied. And that's what matters, Victor. You're already on the right path. As the conversation unfolded, Victor felt a new resolve forming within him. He would not only continue his musical journey but also look for ways to give back, to help those around him without seeking anything in return. Their discussion continued for a while longer, talking about future plans and possibilities. As they said their goodbyes that night, Victor left not only with the lessons learned on stage but also with a deeper understanding of the impact he could have beyond it. And as he prepared for the next step in his career, he knew that the revelations of that night would shape not just his music but his entire life. After David's revelation and the memorable night of the festival, Victor felt that his life had entered a new phase. Gradually, his name began to echo in the city's musical circles and beyond. Each performance he gave, each melody he shared, reinforced his reputation as a talented and deeply emotional musician. His success wasn't limited to the stage. Victor used his growing influence to foster positive change. With David's help, he started a series of free music workshops for young people in underserved communities. Music saved my life, Victor explained during an interview with a local radio station. Now, I want to give others the same opportunity to express their emotions and perhaps find a better path through art. Victor, how do you balance your rising career with these community initiatives? The interviewer asked, clearly impressed. It's a matter of priorities, Victor replied thoughtfully. Music gave me a voice, and I chose to use that voice to make a difference. Each project, each concert, is a chance to touch hearts and open minds. It's exhausting, yes, but also incredibly rewarding. As his career flourished, so did his mother's health. With the resources now available, Hannah received the best medical treatment, and her strength and vitality began to return. On a sunny afternoon, while Victor was visiting her, she expressed her gratitude and admiration. You've done so much for us, my dear. I see your passion and hard work reflected not only in your music but in the life you are building. I am so proud of you. Victor held his mother's hand, moved. You are my inspiration, Mom. All of this is for you, for us. Victor's actions did not go unnoticed. He was invited to speak at conferences about the role of art in education and social rehabilitation, and each forum provided him a platform to discuss his philosophy of life and music. His story of determination and compassion began to inspire many, both within and outside the musical community. At one of these events, a discussion about the social impact of art, Victor shared, I believe that art has the power to break down barriers and build bridges. It teaches us empathy, challenges us to think, and most importantly, reminds us of our shared humanity. The audience was visibly moved, many nodding in agreement, while others approached to personally thank Victor for his contribution. It was at one of these occasions that he met Elena, a young activist working to integrate art into recovery programs for at-risk youth. The connection between them was immediate, and a new collaboration began to take shape. Years had passed since Victor first stepped onto the stage of the festival that changed his life. Now, he was sitting in an elegant, luxurious restaurant, watching his mother, Hannah, who was chatting animatedly. The place was sophisticated, with well-arranged tables, soft lights hanging from the ceiling, and live piano music filling the atmosphere with a tranquil melody. Do you remember, Victor, all those difficult nights? Hannah asked, smiling as she took a sip of her wine. I used to think I wouldn't see many more days. And now, look at us. Victor, with a warm smile, nodded. I remember, Mom. And yes, look at us now. You've not only recovered your health, but you're stronger than ever. Watching his mother, who now exhibited a vitality he hadn't seen in years, he felt a mix of relief and pride. And it's all thanks to you, my dear. Your success not only brought us financial stability but also gave me a reason to fight, to see you grow and achieve everything you always dreamed of," said Hannah, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. "I wouldn't have gotten anywhere without you, Mom. You gave me the strength to keep going, even in the hardest moments," Victor replied, holding her hand across the table. "And speaking of dreams, do you remember our little dream of having dinner in a place like this when I was a kid?" Hannah laughed, a joyful sound that echoed through the quiet space. "How could I forget? You always said that one day you would take us to the most elegant restaurant in the city. And here we are." The waiter approached, delicately placing plates of an exquisite appetizer in front of them. Victor looked at the dish, then at his mother, savoring the simplicity of the moment. "You always believed in me, even when I doubted myself. That meant more than you'll ever know," Victor said before they began to enjoy the food. As the meal progressed, they discussed not only Hannah's recovery but also the latest events in Victor's career. He talked about his future projects, including an international tour and a new album on the horizon. "Mom, I've also been working with some organizations. I want to use music to help people facing difficulties, like we did," Victor shared, his enthusiasm evident in his voice. Hannah nodded, clearly proud. "You've always had a big heart, Victor. I knew you would do something special with your talent." As the night went on, the restaurant's ambience seemed to reflect their state of mind. Calm, happy, and full of hope for the future. They ended the meal with a decadent dessert, toasting to many more years of health and success. After the meal, as they prepared to leave the restaurant, Victor reflected on how his journey, although filled with challenges, had also been a source of growth and healing. He knew that regardless of the ups and downs the future might bring, he had a solid foundation of love and support. Victor and his mother were leaving the restaurant, still wrapped in the memories of a delightful meal. They had just crossed the elegant portico when they were approached by a small group of fans waiting for Victor. Even away from the stage and the spotlight, he never ceased to attract admirers. Victor smiled, accommodating the kindness and patience he had for his fans. "Hello. Thank you for waiting," he said as he took a pen from one of his assistants, ready to sign autographs in notebooks, CDs, and even a few T-shirts that were handed to him. While he was signing, a small and excited voice stood out among the murmurs of the group. "Mr. Victor, you are my favorite singer. I listen to your songs every day." The voice belonged to a bright-eyed girl who stretched out a photo album for him to autograph. Victor laughed at the child's enthusiasm. "Really? What's your favorite song?" he asked, carefully signing the album. "The one you sing about hope and dreams," she exclaimed, bouncing with excitement. "Well, I hope you keep dreaming and reaching for the stars," Victor replied, handing her the signed album. The girl beamed, thanking him before running back to her mother, who was waiting a little distance away. It was then that Victor saw her. Suzanne, holding the girl's hand, looked at him in surprise. Her expression carried a complexity of emotions that Victor couldn't decipher from a distance. He kept his expression neutral, briefly waving to the girl as she walked away before turning his attention back to the other fans. After finishing the last of the autographs, Victor thanked the group and returned to the car with his mother. Hannah, who had observed the brief exchange from a distance, asked softly, "Are you all right, Victor?" "Yes, Mom, I'm fine," he replied, his voice calm but thoughtful. "Life is full of surprises, isn't it?" "Yes, my son, it is," said Hannah, placing her hand over his. "But you handle them with such grace." Victor smiled at his mother, grateful for her constant presence and unconditional support. As they drove back home, he reflected on the brief encounter with Suzanne. It was a reminder that the past always had a way of presenting itself, but he had learned to look forward, focusing on the present and the future. The night was deepening when Victor arrived home. The brief interaction with Suzanne still echoed in his mind, serving as a reflective mirror of his own journey. As he sat in his comfortable chair in the corner of his music studio, surrounded by instruments and awards that testified to his success, Victor plunged into deep introspection. He thought about Suzanne, now visibly living a more modest life, and how their realities had diverged so much since their school days. It wasn't with satisfaction that he observed the change in fortunes, but with a feeling of compassion and understanding. "We all face our challenges," Victor murmured to himself, the words filling the room's silence. His phone rang, bringing him back from his reverie. It was Elena, the activist with whom he had recently started working on therapeutic music projects. "Hi, Victor. Just checking if we're still on for the meeting tomorrow about the new project with the young musicians?" "Yes, of course, Elena. I'm really looking forward to it," Victor replied, his voice animated by the prospect of continuing the work he was so passionate about. "And Victor, I just wanted to say, your work is really inspiring. Not just in music, but in how you use your success to help others." "It's rare and admirable," said Elena, her voice laden with sincerity. "Thank you, Elena. It means a lot to hear that. I believe we have the power to make a difference, and I intend to use every opportunity one have," he responded, feeling a wave of gratitude for being able to do what he loved while also contributing positively to society. After hanging up the phone, Victor stood up and walked to the window, looking at the stars shining in the night sky. He reflected on Elena's words, on the recognition his efforts were receiving, and how it reinforced his commitment to continue his journey not just as a musician but as an agent of change. "It seems that every note I've played, every word I've sung, has brought me to this moment," Victor thought aloud. "It's not just about hitting high notes, but about reaching people, touching their lives in ways I never imagined." In the silence of his home, with the night slowly giving way to dawn, Victor felt a profound peace. He knew that challenges would continue to come, that the journey was far from easy, but he was prepared. With each melody and each project, he would continue to weave his life of influences and inspirations, increasingly aware of the true values he had learned along the way: compassion, dedication, and the relentless pursuit of meaning and connection. After a night of deep reflections and realizations, Victor and his mother Hannah found themselves back in the car, ready to return to the comfort of home. The comfortable silence between them was filled only by the soft hum of the engine and the occasional glow of passing streetlights. Victor, looking out the window at the still dark horizon, contemplated the path he had traveled. "Mom," Victor began, his gentle voice breaking the silence, "do you remember when I was little, playing piano in the living room, imagining big stages and applause?" Hannah smiled, remembering those days. "Of course I remember. You always had a great passion for music. Even when things got tough, you never stopped playing." She paused, looking at her son with a mix of admiration and affection. "And now, look at everything you've achieved." Victor nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Yes, but I could never have done it without your support, without your strength. You always believed in me, even when I doubted myself. All of this, everything we've done together, it changed not only my life but also the lives of many others." Hannah held Victor's hand, squeezing it lightly. "And that, my dear, is the true power of music. Not just notes and melodies, but messages of hope, of courage, of not giving up." Victor reflected on his mother's words. "I want my legacy to be that, Mom. That my music continues to inspire and help others, even long after I'm gone." "That's not something you want, Victor," Hannah gently corrected him. "It's something you're already doing. You touch people's souls, and that's a precious gift." The car turned onto their street, the first light of dawn beginning to color the sky with shades of blue and gray. As they parked, Victor took one last look at the horizon, now slowly illuminating. "It's true," he said, a smile forming as he watched the sunrise. "I think every song I've written, every note I've played, was a seed planted. And to see it all flourish, it's more than I could have asked for." As they got out of the car, Victor and his mother walked to the front door. Before entering, Victor stopped and looked back at the now brightening horizon, thinking about the future. "Let's keep doing this, Mom. Let's keep planting hope, sharing music, and making a difference, together." Hannah smiled and hugged her son. "Always, Victor. Always together. With this renewed commitment, Victor knew that, regardless of the adversities that might still arise, he and his music would always find a way to bring light where there was darkness, to turn challenges into opportunities, and to touch the hearts of those who needed a little more hope. And so, with each note he played, with each word he sang, Victor was building a legacy of light and music, a true testament to the transformative power of art.
So, if you're not subscribed yet, click on the subscribe button below and join our community. Thank you for your support and see you in the next videos.